Hi traders, and welcome to the Arithmetic Operators lesson. In this lesson, I will be showing you how to use arithmetic in your scripts. So let's do a very simple example to start with. Let's do some addition. I'm going to comment here first. We'll just say perform some arithmetic. And the first thing we're going to do is some addition. Welcome back to kindergarten math. We are just going to add 1 to 1. And then we'll plot this onto the chart. And let's give it a color of color.green. Save the script. I should also comment here, draw arithmetic. And surprise, surprise, when you add 1 to 1, you get 2. So that is how we add numbers. We use the plus symbol, as you might imagine. Same for subtraction. Subtraction equals, let's do 10 minus 5. So that is how you subtract numbers using the minus sign. Very simple stuff so far. Where it gets a little more complicated is the multiplication, division, and modulo operators. So let's move on to multiplication. Multiply. Let's multiply 2 by 5. So to multiply, we use the star or asterisk symbol. So we don't do x, we do 2 star 5. And the star symbol will multiply this number by that number. So now, let me copy that, paste it down there, and we'll draw our multiply equation result to the chart. Let's draw it in purple. Save the code. Now you can see our numbers up here, and this is how you do basic math in PineScript, using the plus, minus, and star symbol. Now for division, we use the / operator. So let's try 12 divided by 2. Paste this down here, paste that in there. We'll change the color of this so we know that it's a different plot. We'll change it to orange. Save the script, and we should get 6 in orange, drawing onto our indicator. So far, so good. Let's move on to the modulo operator. So those of you who are not mathematically inclined may have never heard of this operator. I certainly didn't before I became a programmer. But basically, the modulo operator is very similar to division, except that instead of returning the result of this number divided by this number, the modulo operator returns the remainder of this number divided by this number. So for example, if I do 10 and then a percentage sign, which is the modulo operator, and then let's put in 5, and I'll plot this to my chart. Modulo, we'll give it a color of color.white. Let me save the script. When I save the script, we should be getting the number 0 plotting in white, because 10 divided by 5 gives you an even 2 without a decimal place after it. There is no remainder. If, however, I change this 5 to a 6, then we'll be getting a different value plotting in white. We get 4. Let's change it to 10 divided by 9.5, for example. When we save the script, we will get 0.5 plotting onto the chart. So that's what the modulo operator does. It's pretty handy in some use cases. You won't be using this very often. Unless you're a hardcore math person, you probably won't use the modulo operator at all. So that's basically it for our arithmetic operators. We only have a few to work with: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and modulo. Now, one thing I want to mention is something to do with strings. So when we're dealing with strings, we can also use the plus sign to concatenate. It's called concatenation. Now, I know for those of you who are new to programming, all of these weird jargon words are probably starting to freak you out a bit. Concatenation just means adding two strings together. So for example, let's create a new variable here called string concatenation. If we were to add the text EUR, and then use the plus sign, and then add another bit of text here, another string, in USD. Now, if I use the plot shape function, let's go plot shape, and I'll just say bar state.isLast, and we'll set the text to string concatenation. Now, if I save this code, you can see down here that we have our text drawing onto the chart, and we have added the text USD to the text euro. So you can use the addition operator with strings. You can't use subtraction or division or anything like that, but you can add two strings together. Now, this can be useful for such cases as, for example, I have a script that auto trades on the Forex markets. When I send my commands to a third party, I need to send the symbol that I'm on. Let's go to euro dollar for this example. Now, the problem I have when I'm sending my command to my third party API, which automates my trade commands, is that when I was sending my symbol to my broker at the time, which was Oanda, so let's go to the Oanda data feed. When I was sending my symbol ticker to Oanda, it was sending it like this. It would just send Euro USD. Now, the problem is when I was executing my automated trade commands, we needed a symbol of Euro/USD, but there was no way to get this from the symbol directly. So I had to add the slash in. The way I did that was using the sim info. Don't worry, we'll cover sim info in a different lesson. But I could get the sim info.currency and then add a slash as a string in the middle, and then add sim info.base currency onto the end of that string. Now let's save this script. So now I've encountered an issue because this is not a constant string, meaning that this string can change based on whatever market I've loaded onto my chart. We cannot use the plot shape function to draw text. So I need to do something a little bit different here to show this, and let's use a label. So here I'll say my label equals bar state.isLast ? Label.new. And here I will just pass in the bar index and the high of the current bar, and text will be set to our string concatenation. And I'll get rid of this plot shape. Now this should work, hopefully. Oh, I need to add on the otherwise NA. We'll get to these conditional operators or ternary operators in a different lesson. So my apologies, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. Don't be confused by this. You don't need to know what this does just yet. We'll cover that in a moment in a future lesson. So let me save this code. And now we have the text drawing, but I've got it the wrong way around. I need to swap these around. So siminfo.basecurrency plus / plus siminfo.currency, save that. Now we have our ticker ID, Euro USD, converted into the appropriate syntax for my third-party trade automation API. The way we do that is using the plus symbol with our strings. Now, don't worry, we'll cover trade automation far later in the course once you're familiar with all of these concepts. For today's lesson, if you're new to coding, I just want you to take away the fact that we can add strings together. And don't worry about how I drew it. We'll cover that in a future lesson. But that is what it looks like when we do this, when we add strings to each other. It's pretty intuitive, except for the fact that if we wanted to add a number into the string, we need to use the str.toString function, which I've showed you already in a few lessons. So for example, if we wanted to add the closing price to this label, we would need to use the str.toString function. So if I were to save this code, we now have a label drawing the ticker ID with a / in it, and we are drawing our closing price onto that label as well as text. Now, there are two other things I want to mention before we wrap up this lesson. The next thing is that, let me create a new variable here called float conversion. If you multiply an integer, so a whole number, by a float number, that will convert your value, your variable, into a float. So, for example, if I multiply 1 by 1, and we plot that onto the chart, let's set this to fuchsia. Let's save the script. So now we've got 1 times 1 is drawing a whole number here. But if I change this to 0.5, our float conversion will turn from an integer, a whole number value, into a floating point value, which means that any functions you use that have a certain input parameter that requires an integer, this variable will no longer work since it has been converted into a float or a decimal number. So that's important to keep in mind. The final thing I want to mention is that if you have the value NA anywhere in your equation, that will result in an NA value. So I'll show you what I mean there. If I say NA value equals 10 times 3, and let me plot that to my chart, NA value with a color of, let's go color dot blue. Save that code. So now we have 10 times 3 drawing onto the chart. If I try to add NA to that equation and save my script, we no longer have any number drawing here, we just have NA drawing to the chart. So if any of your variables are set to NA and you try to multiply them, add them, or perform any arithmetic, any operation at all on that variable, it will convert the entire result into an NA value. So that's important to mention, and that pretty much wraps up this lesson. The one last thing I will mention before we move on is that we do have a bunch of math operators that we can deal with as inbuilt functions. So if I type math.control space or command space on a Mac, here is the plethora of mathematical functions we have to work with. And there are a lot of them. Now, I won't go over all of these in this lesson. Maybe we'll cover it in a future lesson. But if you're experienced with mathematics, then everything you need in order to perform complex calculations is in this library or namespace. So for example, if you need the logarithmic value of a number, so you can get the sine value, the square root, there's a lot of options we have to deal with when working with math. You can even get random numbers or pseudo-random numbers. For those of you who are familiar with coding, there is no such thing as truly random, only simulated random numbers, but it's good enough for our purposes as coders. And you get the idea. There are a heck of a lot of options here to deal with when working with mathematical formulas. Probably the most useful mathematical function for those of you who maybe don't want these advanced math functions, but just want to do simple things with your scripts. Abs will convert any negative number into a positive number. Abs is short for absolute. So for example, if I pass fraction value, and let's plot that into our plot here, and let's change it to 5 minus 10, save that code. This will still say 5, even though it's a negative number. 5 minus 10 is negative 5. Our red number here is still plotting positive 5 because we have converted that number into an absolute number using the math.abs function. Another useful math function is round. So round will round your number to whatever you tell it to round it to. So we have precision as well. You can round a number to a certain level of precision. If you want to round a number into a whole number, you just use the round function and pass in your decimal number. So for example, if you want to convert our float conversion number into a whole number, I'll paste that over float conversion. Keep an eye on the purple number here. This should round up to the number 1. Let's save our code, and there you have it. It is now plotting 1 because we are rounding our 0.5 up to 1. Hey traders, editing Matt here, just interjecting, add a little bit more information to this lesson. In editing, I realized I forgot to mention 2 other operators we can use with arithmetic. They're pretty simple, but basically, let me create a counter variable initialized to 0, and then on the next line, let me increment that counter variable by 1. So the plus equals operator can be used to increment this variable by however much you want. So if I plot this to my chart, save the script, we'll be getting 1 drawing onto our chart. And if I copy this line of code twice and save the script, we'll be getting 3 drawing onto the chart. If I add 10 to this, it becomes 12 because we're adding 1, then 2, then 10. And it's the same with the subtract operator. Minus equals will subtract this number from this variable's value. So now if I save the script, we should be getting negative 8 because we are adding 1, then 2, then subtracting 10 from 2. That gives us minus 8 or negative 8. It's a simple operator, but very useful when we get to for loops and while loops because it saves us from having to write code like this. Now you may see me from time to time still do this just because it's a habit. The plus equals operator is a new operator that I'm still getting used to using. I'm still turning that into a habit of mine in my coding. But this does the exact same thing. This is saying assign the value of counter to counter plus 1. So this will still plot 1 onto our chart, but we can shorten that code by just using the plus equals. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Let's wrap up this lesson. Anyway, that will do it for this arithmetic operators lesson. We'll cover all of this and some of the math functions in future practical example lessons. But for now, that is an introduction to arithmetic in PineScript. See you in the next lesson.